Thanks, Dean. So I was tasked to provide a sort of a market perspective on the thin film market, where it is today and where we can expect it to be over the next 5 years, so 2013 or so. So just to give you a sense of, what happened last year as far as the, where the thin film market was, the industry was, I just want to give you an overview of the production side of things. So overall, thin film had a market share when it comes to modules of about 19%, for cells, and which is slightly higher for modules, 22%. And that was significantly higher than its share in 2008, which was only 14%. If you look at the three prominent thin film technologies, it's no secret that cadmium telluride, i.e. First Solar, drove the majority of this growth. But you'll also actually see that amorphous silicon production ramped up pretty hard as well. So we estimate almost 800 megawatts of amorphous silicon was produced. There were 37 firms with at the megawatt level of production, compared to only 22 in 2008. So 15 more manufacturers, active manufacturers, entered the space in 2009, despite the well-documented difficulties that manufacturers faced in 2009. And there were 10 firms with more than 30 megawatts of production, compared to only 4 in 2008. So that's pretty significant production growth. It's true that when you look at the profit performance, the financial performance of these firms, it wasn't all great. Many of these manufacturers produced at no margins or maybe negative margins, but it certainly demonstrates the ability of thin film amorphous silicon to ramp up. And then just to provide an overview on SIGs as well, we saw more than 150 megawatts of SIGs being produced in 2009, which was a market share of 2%, which doesn't seem very significant, but it actually represents a very high year-over-year growth. There were 13 firms at the megawatt level of production, and of that, 3 firms actually had more than 30 megawatts, which is quite significant given the skepticism we've seen about SIGs in the market. So that was 2009. Where do we expect the market to be in 2013? And perhaps this slide should have been actually at the end of the deck, but I'll talk about it now. So all market research firms obviously have their own estimates as far as market share and the evolution of production technologies is concerned. And there's obviously a lot of educated guessing going on here, a lot of variables used as inputs to these models. By the end of the day, what are we likely to see? Well, 2010, this year, we are actually likely to see for the first time in many years a dip in thin film's market share, a pretty incremental dip. And that's largely because there's going to be a pretty significant ramp up from Chinese crystalline silicon manufacturers and only an incremental ramp up from First Solar, which has been driving most of the market up to this date. When you look past 2010, we are forecasting that a steady increase in thin film market share year over year. It's not going to be dramatic. It's going to be a couple of percentage points every year, to the point where production share could be 26% for the calendar year 2013. And what's really driving this is that we expect to see a lot of the cost reduction efforts by companies and OEMs come to fruition in the next few years for not all, but many manufacturers in the space, as well as the alleviation of this whole bankability issue that Dean was talking about. The fact of the matter is there are a number of thin film manufacturers with competitive cost structure today, but they were effectively shut out of the market in 2009 because of these bankability issues, and we can get into more detail about what this bankability term means if you'd like to. What you can see from the breakdown here, what you really want to be looking at, the orange and the purple bars are variants of crystalline silicon, and the green, the red and the blue represent amorphous SIGs and CATL respectively. You can see the CATL share growing, being successively diluted somewhat because First Solar can't double its production every year, and that means that amounts to amorphous silicon and SIGs assuming more of an importance, carrying more of the thin film load on their backs as time goes on, to the point where in 2013 amorphous silicon would have almost 10% share and SIGs would jump to 6%. So that in some sense is good news for the market. What's the not so good news? Well, fact of the matter is that there's way too much capacity in the market, and most of this capacity, this manufacturing capacity, is uncompetitive. At this point in time, and probably for the next few years, most of the manufacturers in the market will still be playing cost catch-up with the Chinese crystalline silicon manufacturers and First Solar. And when you look at how much capacity there's going to be versus how much production we're forecasting, you can look at how well the factories' capacities will be utilized. How much these factories will be running. And you can see the green and the red bars are pretty low in 2010, 2011. And what this means is that many companies won't be doing well. That's just a conclusion you can draw from this graph. What you see here is that thin film companies are basically in a race between becoming profitable and staying solvent. And it could happen that, and it probably will happen, that many manufacturers will not have the time that they would like to become profitable. They'll become insolvent before that. And this certainly applies more so to, say, amorphous silicon companies when you talk about mergers and acquisitions and insolvencies, because there is less differentiation across producers. It lends itself more to M&A activity. And to that point, we have already seen signs in motion. We've seen, the well-documented difficulties that Applied's been having with its Sunfab production line. We've had a couple of bankruptcies being announced as well. So, the stage is set, and we expect more on the horizon. So that said, post this consolidation, which we certainly expect to see in motion beginning in 2011, right now things are, the market, everybody in the market is reasonably happy. The demand outlook is very, very positive. Bumper year for Germany. 2011, you'll have more feed-in tariff cuts. It's going to make life difficult for not just thin film producers, but in fact, high-cost producers all across all technologies. What we expect post a consolidation phase is that just like First Solar has been driving the thin film market historically, you'll have individual companies. So maybe 15 or 20 companies driving the thin film market really. These are the successful companies, the haves. The have-nots will have largely exited the space in multiple ways. And these bigger, leaner thin film companies, fewer thin film companies will be driving the market. And it will be these companies that will be largely engaged in the goal or the dream of high margin thin film production, which has been First Solar's domain. Many of the producers in this market will be relegated to possibly low margin products. For the high cost producers, there's really no scope when you look forwards to compete in the grid connected markets. Now, either these companies will be forced to exit the market, or they will be restricted to playing in perhaps more niche markets. So off-grid markets, PV markets. When you're talking about amorphous silicon specifically, when you look at who's producing the amorphous silicon, it's clear that the Asian firms, to a large extent, would be dominating thin film production. And when you think about who they'll be selling to, I think Dean alluded to this, and so did Peter, the success of amorphous silicon from our point of view really hinges on markets where it has a competitive advantage. And those happen to be hotter climates with less space constrictions. So and larger systems. So effectively, utility scale markets in emerging markets like China, India, and the Middle East, and perhaps in the southwest of the U.S., where you have the superior temperature coefficient or the lower degradation due to higher temperature of amorphous silicon coming into play. Another thing is that we think most turnkey producers will not succeed. Now, there's a difference between most and all, and actually, we are most positive from all the turnkey producers about Oerlikon. I would say that, and I'm not just saying that, we've documented this in our report. Last thing I want to say is that, so this is the outlook for the next 5 years, and you can argue that perhaps it's not the most exciting, but it is a nuanced argument that I'm making here. The question is, what's going to happen post 2013? That's really what we're thinking about. We're thinking about what is thin film eventually going to end up doing? What is its place in the market? And there's really two scenarios. One is that its market share stabilizes at, say, 25%, where it is expected to be in 2013. It's going to have a role in the market. It's going to be pretty substantial, but the market is still going to be dominated by and large by crystalline silicon. The other one is, the disruption argument, which is that we expect an inflection point to be hit at some point past 2013. You're going to see rapid market share growth, to the tune of what we've been seeing historically, 6%, 5% every year, to the point where thin film actually displaces crystalline silicon as the dominant technology. The big question is, which of these scenarios will play out? And the answer is, actually, we don't know. Forecasting beyond 5 years, it's difficult to forecast in this industry for beyond 5 months. So I wouldn't even hazard a guess. But it'll all come down to these two levers, costs and efficiency. It will, and more specifically, it's going to come down to the eventual floor on thin film costs and the eventual ceiling on thin film efficiencies. These are really the open questions here. And it's very difficult to predict these at this time. That's where I'll leave things. There's a lot more to say, but we can have that in the Q&A. And I just want to point out, since Peter did a little product plug, I'll do a little product plug here. Most of this analysis came from a report that we just published on thin film. We're very proud of it. It's out there in the market. And that's what I have to say.
Thanks, Shyam.